completely fulfilled.
She was leading the tributes just days after she'd met the Queen to become Prime Minister.
It was just 3 days ago
all about
the Queen that she invited me to form a government and become her 15th Prime Minister. Again, she generously shared with me her deep experience of government, even in those last days.
And she paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth's achievement.
She reinvented monarchy for the modern age. She was a champion of freedom.
King, and she had such a beautiful sense of humour, and I feel like there were some really great moments. Thank you so much, Ruth, who's texted in this evening. Ruth was lucky enough to meet the Queen actually when she was a kid. I actually feel really jealous. I haven't had that privilege. She became a royalist from then because she said the Queen was just so warm. And Ruth says she's so sad at her passing, but she's loving the tunes. Thank you so much. We've got some really gorgeous tunes to play you this evening. Hello to Irene, who's also texted in, lucky enough to meet the Queen when her daughter was invited to the garden party back in 2011. Her daughter was 18. This is lovely, actually. She said that was special enough, but we got chosen out of all the people there to be introduced to the Queen. We were taught how to curtsy and how to say ma'am, as in ham. I really like your message. Thank you so much. She says it was so surreal. I can imagine. And I want to say hello to Rachel, and thank you so much for your message this evening. She says that she's really enjoying the tunes that we're playing this evening. They have been amazing. And that's what it's all about this evening. It's all about spending our time together, relaxing and reflecting. And if you do want to get in touch with me, if you do have a special moment about the Queen, maybe a favourite that really stands out, 8 21 22 is the number to text me. This is James Morrison now on Heart.
You wanna stay with me in the morning. You only hold me. Doors of every home in the country. Give mouth out. We're able to reach beyond that. They saw us and steal us. At the time we were most alone. At the time we'd been driven apart. The nation close. In a way no one else could have done. Okay, he said. The thing is spinning. A nation requires a skill set. And times are difficult. Direction is it's underpinned by one crucial understanding. That the country she came to symbolize is bigger than any one individual or any one institution. It is the sum total of all our history and all our endeavours, and it will endure.
The SNP leader, Ian Blackford, talked about the Queen's family links with Scotland, a descendant of the House of Stuart.
The relationship between Scotland and the Queen was one of shared admiration. Indeed, whilst she was everyone's Queen, for many in Scotland, she was Elizabeth, Queen of Scots.
Balmoral, where she died, had been her favourite home.
It is clear that Balmoral has been a place of peace and sanctuary for her throughout her whole life, and perhaps particularly so following the death of her husband, life companion and love, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. It is therefore perhaps fitting that she has met her final peace at Balmoral, a place where she found such enjoyment and comfort. And as someone of demonstrably strong faith, she will now have enduring peace with herself and, of course, to be reunited with Prince Philip. Her Majesty was a life of grace and wisdom, defined by its service to the public and by the lives that she touched. Her legacy and her enduring presence will live on. God bless the Queen, May she rest in peace. God bless the King.
Just as Liz Truss had travelled to Balmoral to become Prime Minister earlier in the week, so her predecessor Boris Johnson had gone there to resign. He recalled the moment.
Only 3 days ago, when she saw off her 14th Prime Minister and welcomed her 15th, and I can tell you, in that audience, she was as radiant and as knowledgeable and as fascinated by politics as ever I can remember, and as wise in her advice as anyone I know, if not wiser.
The Queen, he added, had comforted and guided all her Prime Ministers.
She had the patience and the sense of history to see that troubles come and go and that disasters are seldom as bad as they seem. And it was that indomitability, that humour, that work ethic, and that sense of history, which together made her Elizabeth the Great. And when I call her that, I should add one, Elizabeth the Great, I should add one final quality, of course, which was her humility. Her single bar electric fire Tupperware using refusal to be grand. And unlike us politicians, with our outriders and our armour-plated convoys, I can tell you, as a direct eyewitness, that she drove herself in her own car with no detectives and no bodyguard, bouncing at alarming speed over the Scottish landscape to the total amazement of the ramblers and the tourists we encountered.
Another former Prime Minister, Theresa May, also remembered her weekly meetings with the monarch.
These were not meetings with a high and mighty monarch, but a conversation with a woman of experience and knowledge and immense wisdom. They were also the one meeting I went to, which I knew would not be briefed out to the media.
Labour's Harriet Harman, briefly Social Security Secretary at the start of the Blair years, described how she met the Queen to receive her seals of office.
But when just a year later I was sacked, and the seals taken out of the safe and taken back to Buckingham Palace, my diary was empty and my phone stopped ringing. My office was astonished to get a call from Buckingham Palace. No one else wanted to have anything to do with me, but the Queen wanted to see me. I was invited to take tea with the Queen for her to thank me for my service as Secretary of State.
For the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey said there was a real sense of public loss.
The deep mourning across the country now, just like the celebrations of her Jubilee a few months ago, comes not from a sense of duty, but from genuine and heartfelt affection, love, and admiration of Her Majesty. It was not because we were her subjects, but because she was truly our Queen.
Sir Ed Davey. The Speaker had set aside another 9 hours for tributes. Mandy Baker was listening for us.
If there was one anecdote about Queen Elizabeth II that resonated with all MPs, it was this.
The first and most important question we will always be asked on a visit to a primary school is, have you met the Queen?
Labour's Seema Malhotra was one of dozens of MPs who wanted to share their reminiscences on this most historic day. Rosanna Allen Khan, a Labour MP and a doctor, recounted a story told by the trauma surgeon David Knott, who just returned from war-torn Syria.
Meeting the Queen, the doctor was deeply distressed and could not face making polite conversation over lunch about his work. Sensing this, in that special way that she did, the Queen touched his hand and brought forth a silver barrel of biscuits. These are for the dogs, she told him, and they proceeded to spend the lunch feeding the corgis under the table. There, she said, that's so much better than talking, isn't it?
A Conservative, Sir Bernard Jenkins, said the Queen had inspired so many good causes, not least the Commonwealth.
In 1952, a mere 8 nations, which she led, from being an emerging relic of a lost empire, to become a network of nations representing 2.5 billion people in the network world we now live in. Just one of her achievements, but what an achievement. What a legacy for future generations.
The Green Party MP Caroline Lucas also considered her legacy. She said Her Majesty had been one of the most recognisable figures in the world.
I believe that she would want the most abiding aspect of that legacy to be hope and solidarity, as symbolised by the double rainbow that stretched across the skies above Buckingham Palace yesterday, shortly after the announcement of her death. Rest in peace, Your Majesty, and thank you.
The DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, recalled a visit the Queen made to Northern Ireland in 1976, one of the most violent years of the Troubles.
She reminded us that the following year was her silver jubilee and expressed in hope that, and I quote, "The gift I would most value next year is that reconciliation should be found wherever it is needed. A reconciliation which would bring peace and security to families and neighbours at present suffering and torn apart."
The SDLP leader, Colm Eastwood, said his background could hardly be further removed from that of the Queen.
But as a leader of Irish nationalism, I want to place on record my deep appreciation and respect for the Queen's role in forging new bonds of friendship between our islands and between our people here.
The leader of Plaid Cymru at Westminster, Liz Saville-Roberts, remembered how nervous she was when she was appointed to the Privy Council.
Your mind, as it would do, tots up an infinite checklist of everything that could possibly go wrong. And what struck me was something she said. She said, "You may well be worrying that you'll do something wrong or in the wrong order. Don't worry. Whatever could possibly go wrong, I've seen it all before. There's nothing that you could do that would shock me now."
In fact, the Privy Council was the source of many of the stories the more senior MPs were keen to recount. This was Sir Edward Lees.
I was quite nervous, although quite proud to mention to her that my father, many more decades before had been clerk of the Privy Council. I was particularly nervous because when I mentioned that as a young man, very proudly, the Duke of Edinburgh, he said that the whole Privy Council was a bloody waste of time.
A Conservative former minister, Dame Andrea Leadsom, said she had a meeting with the Queen one January at Sandringham.
I recall the Queen saying what a very busy Christmas she'd had, and I suggested, well, at least her family don't need to pause Christmas lunch for the Queen's speech, at which she told me they most certainly did.
Ed Miliband met Her Majesty when he was Labour leader. After he was, as he put it, deposed by the British people, his wife, a High Court judge, became a Dame.
And so we were both invited to the palace to meet Her Majesty. And Her Majesty fixed me with her gaze as we saw each other and said, "Oh, it's you," she said. "What are you doing here?" Knowing full well why I was there.
A Conservative, David Mundell, was made Scotland Secretary after the 2015 election, an election in which the number of SNP MPs increased dramatically. But when they all arrived in the Commons, the seating arrangements proved tricky because some Labour MPs were reluctant to give up any space on the green benches.
The Queen was very familiar with this situation and sought to interrogate me on the rights and wrongs of the issue. And I found myself blurting out, "Oh, Your Majesty, that's Buttockgate." And I thought, in my first meeting with the Queen, I have said the word buttock.
During the state opening of Parliament, while the monarch is at Westminster, it's traditional for one of the government whips to be held hostage at Buckingham Palace to ensure the safe return of the sovereign. The Conservative Justice Minister, Stuart Andrew, was chosen for the role.
I was offered a drink and they said, "Would you like tea or coffee?" And one of them looked at me and thought, "You look more like a champagne man." I said, "Well, I'm never going to do this again, so why not?" Well, it was a big bottle of champagne and I had a good time. A couple of months later, we had the general election and I had to do it again. And as Her Majesty was leaving Buckingham Palace, she turned to me and she said, "And you have a good time again, won't you?"
Although there were many moments of laughter, the overwhelming mood was sombre. Tracy Crouch, the Conservative former minister, was quite emotional.
Last night, as we sat as a family and watched the news break of her death, tears openly rolled down my cheeks and that of my other half.
Our 6-year-old took my hand in his and said, "Don't worry, Mummy. The King will look after us now." He is right. God save the King.
Yeah.
One of the most poignant contributions came from the Health Minister, Robert Jenrick. He said that when he went to Amsterdam to see the secret annex where Anne Frank hid from the Nazis, there were pictures of Princess Elizabeth, as she then was, on the walls.
Why was that? And Otto Frank, their father, is recorded later in life in saying, Anne Frank loved the royals, but it wasn't just that. He wanted to put some photos on the wall that would give the children strength. And Anne Frank said it was also the beautiful smile that kept her going.
MPs will gather for more tributes on Saturday afternoon.
Andy Baker reporting. You're listening to Today in Parliament with me, Mark Darcy. Our headline tonight, tributes have been paid to Queen Elizabeth by parliamentarians on all sides across Westminster. And there were tributes too in the House of Lords. David Cornwall was watching.
Peers, like MPs, began with a minute's silence before the Lord Speaker, Lord McFall, paid his own tribute to the Queen.
Her unique record of public service, deep sense of faith and commitment to her role ensure that she will be regarded as a supreme example of a constitutional monarch.
The newly appointed leader of the Lords, Lord Trew, suggested that the weather at Westminster reflected the national mood.
This is an appropriately dark and dreary day, and it's one we prayed would never come. And these are words that I hoped never to hear spoken, let alone to have to speak. And I ask my lords, how will people conceive of life without Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II?
Lord Trew noted that the House of Lords was where the Queen would deliver the monarch's speech, setting out the government's programme at the state opening of Parliament.
Can we conceive never again hearing that voice, that kindly, gentle voice, as we heard it there from that very throne, my lords, at our state openings?
Labour's leader in the Lords, Lady Smith, highlighted the global impact of the Queen's passing.
It's not just our nations that are deeply shaken. Across the world, from great leaders to school children, we all feel that we've lost something special from our lives. And it was so finely illustrated as last night, around the globe, lights dimmed, flags were flown at half-mast, and national monuments were illuminated.
For the Liberal Democrat leader in the Lords, Lord Newby, the Queen appealed to the better natures of people.
Every year, in her Christmas broadcast, she championed the values of community, generosity, kindness, and service to others. We politicians share these values, but the nature of political debate means that we rarely articulate them.
Lord Judge, who leads the group of crossbench or independent peers, said life had not always been easy for the Queen.
There have been some dreadful times. There have been times when the personal criticism of her was awful. There were times when most of us faced with that sort of criticism would say, okay, I'll give up. There were times too when her personal life must have been filled with a sense of cataclysm.
But he said she'd faced those times and family troubles with great fortitude. Some peers had known the Queen longer than others. Lord Caithness spent his early childhood on the Balmoral estate.
She was a mother that drove her children over to play with us occasionally. She was a mother who behaved as every other mother that I knew did, my lords. And when she occasionally brought her children over, she sometimes joined in the game that we were going to play.
The Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Justin Welby, said people had underestimated the Queen's intelligence.
7 or 8 years ago, I was travelling abroad and someone who had no knowledge of these things said, well, of course, she's not really got that much intellect, has she? I mean, private tutors and all this, what can she know? Oh, what ignorance.
He recalled a speech the Queen, as Supreme Governor of the Church of England, had made at Lambeth Palace 10 years ago.
As she set out there a vision for what an established church should be. It was not a vision of comfort and privilege. It was to say, put very politely, you are here as an umbrella for the whole people of this land. The subtext was, if you are not that, you are nothing.
The Archbishop said she had had a deep understanding of faith. Until the cabinet reshuffle this week, Lady Evans was leader of the Lords and the Lord Privy Seal, a role she held for 6 years. At the state opening of Parliament, it was her job to walk ahead of the Queen during the procession, carrying the royal insignia known as the Cap of Maintenance. She also attended the last Privy Council meeting to be presided over by the Queen.
I was always amazed and impressed by Her Majesty's knowledge about any topic you could think of, her ability to put anybody at ease, and a twinkle in her eye when you didn't quite follow established protocol. And I suspect noble lords will not be entirely surprised to learn that despite my best efforts, I saw that twinkle on more than one occasion.
Labour's Lady Taylor recalled another meeting the Queen held with senior ministers, including Lady Taylor's then cabinet colleague, Claire Short.
Claire was late, so she barges into the room in a flurry and then comes and joins us, and we carry on with the meeting. And then Claire's phone, which we're all told we must leave outside and be turned off, her phone goes off, and the Queen says, I trust it wasn't anybody important. And we carried on with our proceedings.
Several peers highlighted the Queen's role as head of the Commonwealth as more countries became independent of Britain. This was the Liberal Democrat and former children's TV presenter, Lady Benjamin.
As a little girl, I grew up in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, in the 1950s, and I sang God Save the Queen in the school playground every day. Never did I dream that one day I would meet her.
The crossbencher, Lord Hastings, remembered his Jamaican mother and grandmother bemoaning the end of empire.
And on one occasion, listening to my mother railing against the new democracy in Jamaica by saying, them all useless, but the Queen, she gorgeous. And that sense of affectionate love for this distant lady, our sovereign, her sovereign, was deep and immense.
The Queen's reign also saw deep changes in the way the United Kingdom is governed, with devolution to Scotland and to Wales. The former Plaid Cymru leader, Lord Wigley, praised her sense of duty and her ability to combine official duties, such as opening the Welsh Parliament, with other interests.
The celebration dinner coincided with the Euro Cup final, with Manchester United, with a minute to go, losing by 1 goal. Then they equalised, and her joy was palpable. And when they scored the winning goal in injury time, her whoopee was heard by the whole of the room as she almost raised out of her seat.
A former First Minister of Scotland, Labour's Lord McConnell, said he enjoyed his trips to Balmoral more than he expected.
The Queen told a story about 2 American tourists who had been on a bus trip and had wandered round the back of Balmoral to the Rose Garden, where she was tending the roses with a headscarf and sunglasses on. And of course, they didn't recognise her. So they broke into conversation. They were asking her what it was like to work for the Queen.
The Queen played along with it for a few minutes until the tourists moved on.
And they went back round to the bus to leave Balmoral. And she very quickly nipped into the kitchen, took her headscarf off and sunglasses off, went out the front door and waved goodbye to the bus. Only to see these 2 American tourists looking out the window, nudging everybody saying I'd just spoken to her in the garden.
Evidence, he said, of the Queen's great sense of humour and fun.
And that report from David Cornott brings us to our closing headline from Westminster. The Prime Minister has led tributes to the Queen in the Commons. Liz Truss said Queen Elizabeth II was one of the greatest leaders the world had ever known. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the Queen had not simply reigned over us, but had lived alongside us. And there were lighter moments too. The former Prime Minister, Theresa May, shared one memory.
I remember one picnic at Balmoral, which was taking place in one of the bosses on the estate. The hampers came from the castle and we all mucked in to put the food and drink out on the table. I picked up some cheese, put it on a plate, and was transferring it to the table. The cheese fell on the floor. I had a split-second decision to make. I picked up the cheese, put it on the plate, and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen.
Tomorrow there'll be a rare Saturday sitting of Parliament when senior MPs and peers will swear allegiance to the new King before another set of tributes, and there'll be a special edition of this programme at 11:30 on Saturday night. I'm Mark Darcy, the studio manager was Richard Townsend, the editor was Sean Curran, and that was Today in Parliament.
BBC News at midnight. This is Caroline Nichols. King Charles III has paid a moving tribute to his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, in his first televised address to the nation since becoming monarch. He said her love, guidance and example had left the royal family owing her the most heartfelt debt. The King also pledged his whole life in service to the nation, as the Queen had done. The first official rendition of God Save the King has been sung at St Paul's Cathedral at the end of a memorial service for the Queen. Throughout the day, people have continued to gather in large numbers outside royal residences, leaving cards, flowers and messages. MPs and peers have begun 2 days of special sittings to share their memories of the Queen. Also tonight, we reflect on where the United Kingdom is heading after a week of tumultuous change. King Charles III has spoken of his beloved mother in his first televised address to the nation a day after her death. He said it was a time of profound sorrow, but he vowed to renew her promise of lifelong service. King Charles returned to London from Balmoral this afternoon and was given a rapturous reception from well-wishers outside Buckingham Palace. Earlier, gun salutes and church bells rang out across the UK in memory of the Queen, and a service of remembrance has been held at St Paul's Cathedral. Our royal correspondent, Johnny Diamond, has been following the day's events.
At midday at Westminster Abbey, where she was married, where she was crowned, a single bell tolled for the Queen. One toll a minute, one toll for every year of her life, one toll heard 96 times. And across the country, from churches and cathedrals, bells rang out in remembrance and in mourning. Outside Buckingham Palace, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery rode out, the wheels of their dark green gun carriages rumbling against the wet roads, the public held back by lines of police officers. An hour later, those guns were heard from London's Hyde Park, at the Tower of London, and in Belfast, Edinburgh, Cardiff, and across the country and abroad. The guns paid tribute. The King flew to London from Aberdeen and was driven into the capital, atop his car, the royal standard fluttering. The convoy turned into the space in front of the palace, and the King got out to walk the line of the waiting crowd and receive their cheers and commiserations. Down came the Union flag on top of the palace, up went the royal standard, taking its place for the first time in the reign of King Charles. He lingered with the crowds, shaking hands, exchanging the odd word, and then, after inspecting some of the flowers left by well-wishers, he and the Queen Consort turned into the great gates of the palace and went into their new home.
Your Majesty, Prime Minister.
Within hours, the new king was at work, giving his first audience to the Prime Minister, speaking to Liz Truss about the loss of his mother.
Moment I've been dreading, as I know a lot of people.
Come the evening, he had a lot more to say. Just before a service of prayer and reflection at St. Paul's Cathedral, his address to the nation and the Commonwealth was broadcast. For almost 10 minutes, the King spoke from the blue drawing room of Buckingham Palace, a photo of the late Queen by his side. He referred to the pledge of service the Queen gave in 1947. That pledge, he said, I renew today. He announced that the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge would become the Prince and Princess of Wales. He said his work would have to change, less time spent on the charities and issues he cared so deeply about. But most of the address was about the woman, the mother, the Queen, so recently passed.
To my darling Mamma, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this. Thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
At the service, a reading by the Prime Minister and an address by the Bishop of London. The Queen's life, she said, was a reminder of the power and strength of coming together. She would be, she said, profoundly and greatly missed.
In the words of Simeon, when after a long life lived in faithfulness, he met with God incarnate. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. Amen.
And then, to close, a reminder of the continuity of the crown, but the change wrought by the death of a monarch. An anthem so familiar, but now so different.
Charles is due to formally be proclaimed king during an accession council meeting at St. James's Palace in the morning. As is convention, the proclamation will then be read publicly. He's said that as sovereign, he will cease the activism on issues such as the environment that he's pursued passionately during his decades as heir to the throne. Our special correspondent, Alan Little, considers how Charles III will have to adapt to his new role as head of state.
It has been a long journey to the throne, which he ascends at an age when most of us have retired. He was born in 1948 when the country was recovering from a devastating war, and the monarchy had come to symbolize the nation's wartime sacrifice and resilience. The Queen was the last living royal link to that defining national experience. King Charles will have to shape a monarchy for a wholly different time. From an early age, he embarked on a life of public advocacy, expressing opinions and promoting causes that were close to his heart, on architecture, farming, social deprivation, and, above all, the environment and climate change. This drew criticism that he was undermining the monarchy's political neutrality. He has been an activist Prince of Wales. He has long accepted that that will no longer be possible now that he is king. But there is a counter-argument that it is his engagement with the most pressing issues of our day that will place his reign at the heart of national life, renewing and reinvigorating the monarchy. Paddy Harbison is a former communications secretary to the then Prince of Wales.
The environment, interfaith relations, he was ahead of the curve on encouraging closer relations between the great faiths. The future of our food, our farming communities, these are all national issues that matter, and I think they're very relevant. So I think the monarchy under his leadership will remain as relevant as ever.
The King's immediate challenge is to unite the nation and his family through this period of mourning. Queen Elizabeth came to embody something of the character of Britain. We looked at her and saw a set of values that were at the heart of what it meant to be British. Her son's challenge is to define and articulate a set of values that chime with contemporary sensibilities and concerns, and defend the powerful legacy of respect and public affection that she bequeaths him.
Mourners have been gathering at royal residences across the country to pay their respects. At Balmoral Castle, where the Queen spent the final months of her life, people have left flowers, flags, letters and other tributes, including a Paddington Bear toy and a wickerwork figure of a corgi. Our Scotland correspondent, James Shaw, spent the day there.
They started coming here just after dawn, in ones and twos first of all, and then in greater numbers as the day went on. The local council laid on a bus service to bring people from the nearby villages of Braemar and Ballater. People streamed off the coaches holding flowers, bringing children and grandparents. Elizabeth Souter said she felt it was important to come.
She was just like my grandmother, really. She was just someone that was always there. A particular time that I can remember was I attended the Queen's Garden Party, and that was a really special event in my life, being so close to the Queen.
Michael and Shane, a couple from Stockport, were close to tears as they reflected on the huge significance of the moment and their feelings of shock and loss.
Extremely emotional. I don't know why. I couldn't put words to it. I think the moments with like Paddington Bear and the little sort of quips like that, I think just brought a smile, bring a smile to everybody's face, and it's just nice to remember her like that. But yes, can't believe she's gone, can we?
Elsewhere in Scotland, there was a salute by the Royal Artillery from the ramparts of Edinburgh Castle, and bells were tolled at churches. In the coming days, the focus will shift to Edinburgh, where it's expected the Queen's coffin will be taken from the Palace of Holyrood House to St Giles Cathedral before embarking on its journey to London.
MPs and peers have spent the day sharing stories and memories of Queen Elizabeth in special sittings in both Houses of Parliament. After a minute's silence, the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, highlighted what he called her magnificent service and described her as the most devoted monarch. The Prime Minister said the UK was the great country it was today because of her. Our political correspondent, Ben Wright, has been listening to proceedings in the Commons.
The Speaker wore dark Victorian mourning dress with white linen weepers on his sleeves. The Sergeant-at-Arms carried a black sword, last used on the death of the late Queen's father 70 years ago. They processed into a silent, solemn Commons chamber, where MPs' sombre clothing had swathed the green benches in black. The first tribute from the floor of the House was from Liz Truss, who recounted her appointment by the Queen earlier in the week.
It was just 3 days ago at Balmoral that she invited me to form a government and become her 15th Prime Minister. Again, she generously shared with me her deep experience of government, even in those last days.
The Queen first opened Parliament in 1953. Her reign spanned 9 Common Speakers and 18 general elections. Generations of politicians came and went, but the Queen was the nation's constant, as many MPs observed. Quoting the poet Philip Larkin, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said the Queen's death had robbed the country of its stillest point.
On the occasion of the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977, Philip Larkin wrote of her reign, "In times when nothing stood, but worsened or grew strange, there was one constant good. She did not change."
The SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, spoke of the affection which the Queen had for Scotland and that Scotland had for the Queen. Speaking from the backbenches for the first time since his resignation, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson praised the late monarch as Elizabeth the Great. He also recalled the Queen's humility and a memorable journey through the Highlands.
Unlike us politicians, with our outriders and our armour-plated convoys, I can tell you, as a direct eyewitness, that she drove herself in her own car with no detectives and no bodyguard, bouncing at alarming speed over the Scottish landscape to the total amazement of the ramblers and the tourists we encountered.
Sharing their personal memories of the Queen, MPs spoke about her wit and warmth, as well as her dignity and duty. The former Labour Cabinet Minister, Harriet Harman, recalled being sacked from Tony Blair's first government.
My diary was empty and my phone stopped ringing. My office was astonished to get a call from Buckingham Palace. No one else wanted to have anything to do with me, but the Queen wanted to see me. I was invited to take tea with the Queen for her to thank me for my service as Secretary of State.
Tributes in both Houses of Parliament will continue tomorrow. For now, party politics is stilled.
Theresa May, who served as Prime Minister from 2016 until 2019, told MPs about an awkward situation that arose when she was attending a picnic hosted by Queen Elizabeth at Balmoral.
The hampers came from the castle and we all mucked in to put the food and drink out on the table. I picked up some cheese, put it on a plate, and was transferring it to the table. The cheese fell on the floor. I had a split-second decision to make. I picked up the cheese, put it on the plate, and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen. I looked at her, she looked at me, and she just smiled. And the cheese remained on the table.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has described the Queen's death as an enormous blow, but insisted there was still a deep hope for the future. Justin Welby, who served the monarch as the ceremonial head of the Church of England, said many people were feeling a sense of not just grief, but also uncertainty. He was speaking to our religion editor, Ali Makbul.
The loss of Queen Elizabeth is, of course, having an impact right across society, not least in the Church of England, of which she was supreme governor. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, told of his profound sadness and that he understood why many had expressed not just grief, but uncertainty.
Let's not hide the fact that this is an enormous blow. But as Her late Majesty showed us, and as His Majesty is showing and will show us, let us bring that grief and be willing to receive comfort, a fresh abundance of life, and a deep hope for the future.
Archbishop Welby told of the great privilege he had in meeting Queen Elizabeth on many occasions. He spoke of the ways in which it was clear that her faith guided her, and of her humility and kindness.
The Queen constantly showed us the meaning of life. She was joyful, she was humorous, life was full. Even in the annus horribilis, her life was full, but she never, even in bad moments, lost hope.
Many times through her reign, the late Queen talked of the importance of respecting people of all religions and none. That's reflected in the tributes to her service that have come from right across the faith spectrum.
Queen Elizabeth's death means many changes to names and language throughout British life. Our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, has the details.
In the courts, senior barristers are known as King's Counsel. At the first case heard in the Old Bailey this morning, the court usher referred to the King's Justices. Prosecutors will act on behalf of Rex, not Regina. Anyone they convict may be held at His Majesty's pleasure. Members of the armed forces will be subject to the King's regulations. In the House of Commons tomorrow, some MPs will swear a new oath of allegiance to the King. They don't have to. Their original fealty was to the Queen and her heirs and successors, but it's become a custom on the death of a monarch. For peers, a new oath is obligatory. And the next state opening of Parliament will, of course, include the King's speech. Around the world, some of the 15 countries where King Charles is head of state may have to change constitutions that refer explicitly to the Queen. In London's West End, Her Majesty's Theatre is expected to become, yes, His Majesty's Theatre, as it was until the Queen's accession in 1952. Our passports, too, will ask for the bearer to pass freely in the name of His Majesty. Those who want to speak proper will have to learn the King's English, and we're all going to have to get used to singing a national anthem that begins, God save our gracious King.
At some point, Queen Elizabeth's face on coins, stamps and other official items will need to be replaced with that of King Charles. Liz Truss said the Queen's image was an icon for what Britain stood for as a nation. Here's our personal finance correspondent, Kevin Peachy.
29 billion coins in circulation in the UK carry the image of the late Queen. During her long reign, 5 different portraits were used. The latest has featured on coins since 2015. All were given her personal seal of approval. For now, the Royal Mint will continue to strike coins carrying her image, but soon new coins will show King Charles III facing to the left. Centuries of convention mean each monarch faces the opposite direction to their predecessor, a sequence only broken by Edward VIII, although his abdication meant such coins never entered general circulation. Queen Elizabeth II was the first and only monarch to appear on Bank of England banknotes, in addition to more than 30 currencies around the world. Hundreds of products were given her royal warrants. They will now expire, and the by appointment label and royal arms must be withdrawn within 2 years, unless given by the former Prince Charles. The insignia on post boxes and stamps too will need to be redesigned in due course, but according to David Gold of Royal Mail, at no unnecessary extra expense on the new King's wishes.
The clear guidance we were given was you should not be looking to shred or pulp stamps simply so that you could change the image on them. As we all know, the King has long been a keen advocate of, a greener way of living, and I'm sure that's entirely in keeping with that ethos.
Existing circulating coins, banknotes and stamps bearing the Queen's portrait can still be used, with a slow and gradual transition ahead.
A number of events have been cancelled as a mark of respect for Queen Elizabeth. Planned strike action has also been called off, but there's been criticism of the decision to postpone several sporting fixtures, and Jana Gadgil reports.
The BBC announced that it was cancelling the last night of the Proms, the world's largest classical music festival, and Radio 2's live festival in Leeds. The Trades Union Congress has postponed its annual conference, due to be held in Brighton from Sunday, and next week's rail strikes have been called off. The Royal College of Nursing has delayed the opening of its ballot on industrial action, which was due to take place next Thursday. Many sporting fixtures have also been postponed, despite guidance from the Department for Culture, Media and Sport saying there was no obligation to do so. The Football Supporters Association says that matches being called off from the Premier League and WSL down to the grassroots game is an opportunity missed for fans to pay their respect to the Queen. It's looking at ways supporters can be refunded for ticket, travel and accommodation expenses. Cycling's Tour of Britain has concluded without its 2 final stages, citing operational circumstances and a reassignment of police resources. British horse racing and British boxing have also abandoned their fixtures this weekend. There has been no play in the test match between England and South Africa today, but the game will resume tomorrow. Rugby union and rugby league matches will still go ahead, and the Great North Run will take place as planned in Newcastle on Sunday.
The Bank of England has postponed a key decision on interest rates for 2 weeks following the death of Queen Elizabeth. The Monetary Policy Committee, which had widely been expected to increase rates on Thursday, will make its announcement on the 22nd of September. For those who've grown up over the decades with the Queen at the head of the royal family, she's earned respect and admiration for her fortitude and dedication to public service. But there are questions about whether younger generations feel the same way. Our Midlands correspondent, Natesh Johal, has been speaking to 15 and 16-year-olds at a school in Leicester.
Our Queen Elizabeth II, she died yesterday afternoon, aged 96, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland.
There was only one subject on much of the nation's mind today. And in Saw Valley College in Leicester, young people were discussing the monarch who has defined the country she led for 70 years and what comes next.
Yes. Will the money currency change?
Many of us are from ethnic backgrounds and which are part of the Commonwealth, and she has established the Commonwealth to help our people, and she's been working with young people throughout. She worked continuously and tirelessly to make our lives better.
In the photos, she was always waving at kids, going up to kids, having pictures with the kids, and it looked like she was really happy to be with them and happy to do her daily duties and her job, and she seemed like she wanted to be there, not that she was forced to be there and do them things.
Does anybody here believe that the monarchy is not relevant anymore?
I still believe the monarchy is still important in our society because they can still help in many ways, like helping key organizations throughout the world. They help to represent our country.
I think the whole role should be given to the Prime Minister instead, because they're allowed to get involved in decisions on behalf of the people. But I think maybe in 21st century society, you don't really need a hierarchy and we don't need to be living in kings and queens. I think everyone should be equal. I don't think there's any need for a king and queen anymore. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Among these teenagers, there is consensus about their respect and admiration for the Queen. But there are questions about their support for the monarchy's future.
In other news, The police watchdog has launched a homicide investigation into the fatal shooting of Chris Cabba by Metropolitan Police officers in South London. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the decision was taken after a review of the evidence gathered so far about the shooting in Streatham Hill on Monday. Mr. Cabba died after a single shot was fired as police attempted to stop the car he was driving. A man has been arrested at Birmingham Airport in connection with the IRA bomb attack in Manchester in 1996. 250 people were injured in what was described as the UK mainland's largest bomb blast since the Second World War. No one has ever been charged. Police say they've been pursuing new lines of inquiry after reviewing the original case files. The government's confirmed that households which switched to fixed energy tariffs in response to spiralling prices will also benefit from the assistance announced by the Prime Minister on Thursday. Typical bills will be capped at £2,500. This report from our business correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Yesterday's energy announcement was a relief to many thousands of households, but for some who'd already agreed to higher fixed-term tariffs, there was concern that they might be left out. Faced with ever-rising energy prices, they'd already signed energy deals at higher fixed rates, worried that prices would only continue to go up. But the government has confirmed that those on fixed energy deals don't need to take any action. They will have their tariffs cut automatically in line with the scheme. It said the price guarantee will be in place from the 1st of October. Energy firms have said that they will contact customers over what the plans will mean for them. E.ON is telling customers that it will be implementing the government scheme across its tariffs. Octopus Energy is reassuring people it will be in touch with everyone before the 1st of October. And Scottish Power says it will be in touch with customers between now and the 19th of September with details of the new price. The government has said that there will be help for businesses too. The rate they'll be on will be announced in the next few days.
In the city, the 100 share index ended the day up 89 points at 7,351. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones closed up 377 at 32,152. On the currency markets, the pound is trading at $1.15.9. Against the euro, sterling is at €1.15.4. That makes a euro worth 86.7 pence. Chinese scientists have found a new mineral on the moon. Analysis of rock samples received by China's recent Chang'e Air 5 mission revealed crystalline structures that have been confirmed as a totally new mineral deposit. Richard Wheatley has more.
The new colourless crystal named Changasite is about 1/10 of the width of a human hair. The mineral composition of the moon tells the story of the moon in its early days. This is the 6th entirely new mineral to be discovered on the lunar surface, and the first found by China. The leader of the research team, Li Ziying, said the discovery was possible in part due to the location of the Chinese probe in a geologically young region of the moon called the Ocean of Storms.
Scientists have developed a virus-killing plastic that could make it harder for diseases to spread in hospitals and care homes. The team at Queen's University Belfast say their plastic kills COVID-19 and can be fashioned into common disposable gear such as protective aprons. Now for a first look at the morning papers. All of the front pages focus on King Charles and his first address to the nation since taking on his new role. Many of the papers highlight the personal tone of his speech as he spoke movingly about the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. "To my darling Mamma, thank you," is the Daily Telegraph's headline. The Daily Express said he delivered an emotional eulogy. The Daily Mail says it was an exquisite tribute. The Daily Mirror highlights that the King pledged to serve with loyalty, respect and love, as does The Guardian, The Independent and the FT Weekend. They differ from most of the other papers by not using photographs of the King delivering his address on their front pages. They instead showcase images of him outside Buckingham Palace yesterday afternoon, when he met and shook hands with some of the hundreds of people who'd gathered there and read messages of condolence that had been left at the gates of the palace. The Times sums up the day's events with the headline, "God Save the King." Returning to our main story, King Charles III has delivered his first televised address since the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, promising to renew her pledge of lifelong service to the nation. Her death comes at a time of significant uncertainty for the country. Many households are worried about the rising cost of living and the troubles that winter might bring, while a new Prime Minister, only days into the job, faces challenging questions about the future of the Union. Our home editor, Mark Easton, looks at what's next for the United Kingdom.
In bewildering times, the United Kingdom would instinctively look to its Queen for reassurance. But on this occasion, the nation must navigate the uncertainty of a new monarch and a new Prime Minister, significant constitutional and political upheaval in the same week, without her calming presence. There is apprehension around the country, adding to existing foreboding at what the winter ahead might bring. Elizabeth once spoke of her responsibility in supporting the trusted framework of stability and continuity to ease the process of change. But the trusted framework is not as trusted as it once was. There are questions about the values that underpin our governance, what democracy and the rule of law should mean in a Britain adjusting to a new relationship to the wider world, what tolerance and fairness should look like in a country fearing severe hardship in a cost of living crisis, a kingdom unconvinced in some quarters that it even wants to remain as a single sovereign nation. That is why Queen Elizabeth's death represents a hugely challenging moment for the country, for her son, the new king, and for his Prime Minister, Liz Truss. One might argue that we need the late Queen as much at her death as at any point in her long life. Her fingerprints are all over the carefully planned events of the next 10 days, of course. She sought to ensure her kingdom could see through the shock of her loss with conviction and confidence. But after that, a mantle has now been draped across the shoulders of the next generation. Along with the throne, responsibility now belongs to King Charles III.
BBC News.
And the news was read by Caroline Nichols. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Here's Darren Bett.
Hello there. Throughout the week, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of thunderstorms, but this weekend looks like it will be much drier. And the main reason for that, low pressure that brought all the wet and stormy weather is moving away towards the east, and it's already taken away the earlier heavy showers that we had across England and Wales. There's still some cloud wrapped around the low, though, feeding in off the North Sea into northern England, and that's producing a little light rain or drizzle. But elsewhere, generally dry, some clearer spells, particularly clear skies in Scotland and Northern Ireland, so it's going to be chilly here in the morning. Temperatures in Scotland could be 5 or 6 degrees. For England and Wales, with more cloud around, then we're looking at temperatures remaining in double figures. Heading into the weekend then, and we've got a lot of cloud in Northern England, particularly in the northeast of England. Here it will stay cloudy pretty much all day, but the winds will be lighter and the rain will tend to peter out. Elsewhere across England and into Wales, there'll be sunny spells. We will see a scattering of light showers, much drier than it has been of late. And for Scotland and Northern Ireland, after any early mist and fog patches, there should be a good deal of sunshine and the winds will be lighter. It'll feel a bit warmer too. Temperatures typically 19 to 22 degrees on Saturday. For the second half of the weekend, we look to the west. There's another area of low pressure trying to push in from the Atlantic. That will bring some weather fronts into some western areas. The rain just brushing the far southwest of England and across western parts of Wales and arriving into Northern Ireland probably later on in the day. Could see a bit of rain in the far northwest of Scotland on Sunday, but otherwise the rest of Scotland and for much of England and Wales it will be dry. Some early mist and fog patches, but then we should see a fair bit of sunshine. Some patchy cloud will develop, but this time not really expecting any showers to speak of. So a lot of dry weather for many, and it should be a bit warmer, particularly across England and Wales, with temperatures peaking at 23 or 24 Celsius.
Thank you, Darren. On BBC Radio 4, the final episode of our 10-part series, Fatwa, originally broadcast in 2019. Tell me why you're here.
Oh, well, I'm sure you've heard about...
Yeah, I heard about your problem.
And I thought, if there's anybody who could understand what I'm going through, it's you. And to tell you the truth, I'm at my wit's end.
Let me tell you something. It took me a long time. It took me maybe several years to get to the point that I'm going to talk to you about now.
More like 30 years. That's how long it took before Salman Rushdie was able to publicly laugh at the fatwa, the death sentence he received in 1989. It's never been repealed, and he might always be looking over his shoulder, but he's not in hiding anymore. 18 months ago, he appeared in the American comedy Curb Your Enthusiasm. The main character, Larry David, has, so the plot goes, written a musical called Fatwa, and eventually ends up with a fatwa of his own. So he goes to see Rushdie, who says there's an unexpected upside to getting a death sentence from the Ayatollah.
It can be scary, it can be bewildering.
Alright, thanks guys for joining me or for listening to the Queen Elizabeth.
A lot of women who are attracted to you in this condition.
Really? I didn't think there was any